Okay. This is the Grey Lounge, and we are bringing our new program with our very, very close friends and very fine gentlemen that we are working with on another program called Point to Ponder. But this is also another point to ponder. That's why we have started a program which is called All That Matters. And amidst all the news that we get from the Western media, particularly, and the research that people like us tend to do on the basis of the news that we get, and we find plenty of things which are rather unusual. And since the global shift of powers is taking place, there are questions that come to every sane mind, and these questions need to be addressed. These questions need to be addressed totally with a very unbiased mind, and with facts and figures, and with very much of caution, more than anything else, before actually building an opinion about something. And for that matter, we have requested our guests to join us and discuss issues that matter, issues that are taking place around us and will affect us, even if they do not tend to affect us directly at the moment. They will affect us in the long run. And they have an effect geologically and geopolitically in a region like Pakistan, where Pakistan is now actually visibly now shifting towards Russia, China, Malaysia, Turkey, Iran. Now, with this shift of power, with this shift of the countries like Pakistan, a nuclear power like Pakistan, now trying to build relationships with Russia instead of the United States that Pakistan has been an ally of for the past many years. So people in Pakistan are rather confused, and this is why they ask questions. They send us questions across our emails and our WhatsApp groups, that how would things now turn out to be, given the condition that we have at hand, given the situation that we have at hand, where the Russia-Ukraine conflict is actually generating a lot of questions. So that particular situation, I requested Raza bhai, I requested Sergei, and I requested Mushin to shed some light on this, and in a very neutral way, with whatever the actual facts are. And I'm very glad and thankful to all the gentlemen who have actually taken time out of their busy schedules to join us on this podcast. And without further ado, I would pass on to Raza bhai. And Raza bhai, if you could carry on the proceedings and take it further, because I have questions. I have also, we have a poll that we had on our Grey Lounge community. I will discuss that also. So if you start, then we will take it from there.
Cool. Thank you very much for that, and warm welcome to everybody once again. From my perspective, I have a quite a unique perspective, because I have visited Ukraine. I was there for business, where I tried to lease one of my aircraft to Ukraine International Airlines. So I've seen, and this is going back several years. It's not recent. So obviously, I've not been there recently, but the country I visited, and once you've been there, you have a different perspective. You interact with people, you get to know people. Apart from that, I have friends on the ground in Kiev currently, who I've fortunately been able to contact and get to know about their well-being, because I was concerned about with the current sort of situation if they're okay. They confirmed that they've managed to get their family out to Poland, and he himself is staying behind to be part of the resistance. Whether that's forced upon him or not is yet to be seen, but I am in contact with him. Equally, I have friends on the Russian side, so I see that perspective. And then on top of which, sitting here in UK, I'm listening to all the hype that is coming from the Western media, and it seems to be all one-sided. And I feel I can decipher between what is hype and what is reality. And I just find it very strange, we had the whole refugee crisis from Afghan, from Syria, from Yemen, and the same level of noise wasn't being created when they were being forced, and it was a different narrative at that time. These were seen as foreigners, whereas the people from Ukraine are almost as if it's people from their own home country, to a point where the government are actually giving financial package to people if they house these refugees, and quite a substantial package as well. So people are volunteering, and over 150,000 people have offered homes to these Ukrainians, which previously we just not seen. I find that very ironic, and I think we've all seen the images on the borders, whether it's Poland or Romania or any of the other border points, where if you've got blue-eyed, blonde hair, you're allowed in, and yet any of the other foreigners were just turned away or not given the priority. Yes, blue eyes, blonde hair is fine, but we share the same blood. Is the blood not the same from everybody? It's all this hypocrisy around the world, which, one rule for one rule for the other, which I find distasteful. The war in Yemen has been going on for over 7 years. And, the same levels of noise around the world was not there. And I just find it strange that the friends, so-called friends around the world, the Americans, are fighting this proxy war where Europeans are at the forefront of it all, are being forced into this. And once again, it's more to do with world economies, which, it's becoming more and more prevalent, more and more sort of noticeable what, the war will carry on. So much money has been poured into Ukraine. They will be forced, and the killings will go on, and the Ukrainians are being sacrificed. And then, there will be a ceasefire at some stage, and everything will be forgotten about. So there's so much going on that is we don't get to see. And I just wanted to highlight some of that and highlight some of the hypocrisy, and we'll get into that as we go along. But I'd like to bring in our friends. Sergei, it'd be interesting to get your viewpoint on this. And then we'll bring Mushin in after this.
Well, thank you, Raza. And hello, listeners. My point of view is biased, of course. I have Russian background, but I came to Australia 35 years ago, and I studied in Australia, worked my family grew up in Australia. So I have two perspectives, I suppose. One is the fact that I have lived for a long period of time in these countries, Russia and Australia, and acquired, I suppose, a mindset of Western person, guided by education. Somebody can say molded by education, but I'm not going into that. And my family connections are still alive in Russia. So I'm very much similar to you, Raza. I see one-sided representation of the conflict, and I see that it's being done on purpose, but I also see that there was a preparation stage that media influenced majority of people to prepare them for a response that we are now having. where Russian people are discriminated against in Europe, for example. And I think this is kind of an indicator to us that the world is not as stable as we thought it is, and it can shift to a different state very, very quickly. And so, to me, it's a lesson we all have to learn. On the other side, I'm with you rather on the point of hypocrisy. And to me, it's kind of like, let's say we have a soccer match, and a commentator is going to talk about only one team, what it does in a soccer match, and we are listening to the radio. What kind of quality we're going to get? What kind of perception we're going to get from that that soccer match? We are listening where only one team is allowed to be on air. But to me, as a Russian, I see, and I'm going to say it as neutral as possible, because I think the greater value of our meeting is in finding those connection points despite of our differences. But I see Russian perspective, and I see a necessity for what has been done. Yeah. I see Ukrainian tragedy, but when I look at the facts and I line them up in year by year, when Ukraine separated from Soviet Union, being the richest of all republics, having tremendous industries, aviation, shipbuilding, nuclear power, all of that as a backbone. And suddenly, 10 years after that, it became red. All that $180 billion in black suddenly disappeared. Clearly, there was a mismanagement, and still the mismanagement is going on. Clearly, when I hear statements of President Zelensky, I cannot help but think that he's not in control of the country. His statements actually safeguards, because he knows that if he is going to say, we're going to stop, we're going to cease fire, nobody's going to listen to him. So, and that is a conundrum when on one side, the existing power structures, they have virtual representation of command of the country. On the other side, in reality, they don't. And so I would like to raise some other points to do with our perception of what is right and what is true. But I think Mushin is going to contribute, and then we're going to generate better discussion. So I pass it on to you, Mushin.
Okay. So, hello, listeners. I'm situated in Berlin, Germany. So I'm very deep in what they would call Western propaganda. I mean, a long Cold War has kind of prepared us for that. So let me look at it in a little historical perspective. We Germans started the Second World War, and the result of the Second World War was that war, the continuation of that war with other means. So it was called Cold War, and then we have the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and the follow-up republics. So I mean, one of the real difficult questions we need to ask is what to do if a country breaks a treaty, because we don't have like an international police that can come and go, you broke the treaty, right? So now at the end of the Cold War, so I'm not giving the truth because the truth is not living in politics. That's not where truth lives. Truth lives in science. It doesn't live in politics. Politics is the management of conflicting interests, basically. And as the German Clausewitz said about 200 years ago, he said, war is just politics with another means. And I think in that sense, we could regard Putin as a Clausewitz student. Anyway, so the, the 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 difficulty really that I have as a German, because German love rules, and that's what they always say, like we like it straight, and we like it gründlich, and we like rules, right? So the difficulty I have is that after the breakdown of the Soviet Union, there was a major treaty between Russia, the US, and I think it was France, to bring all the nuclear warheads from the Ukraine back to Russia. And Ukraine was guaranteed in this treaty an inviolableness of the borders and some other things. I think the inviolable part of the is important right now. So then you have Maidan, which is viewed from one side as a power grab of fascists, and from the other side as a bloom of democracy. You know, you take your pick. This is politics, so you can always take your picks, what is right, and then you find facts to support that. So, I mean, the real thing, this is, so the real conundrum is how are we going to solve an issue where one party to a treaty, I'm not talking about, you know, us exchanging word and me saying I'm never going to do this or I'm never going to do that. That's not a treaty, that's an agreement, a personal agreement. So what are you going to do if one party has broken at least one, but probably more treaties? The other party couldn't break a treaty yet, really, basically because they're such a young state. So, what you do in a situation like that? War takes away truth. And so, my personal point of view is that we can't hear truth, neither from Russia, nor from the Ukraine, nor from any of the parties involved in whatever way, because they're in politics and they try to hide their real goals. Because if you show your real goals in politics, it's like you open up to be attacked from outside. So you don't. So and then a final thing I wanted to say to make clear where I come from is that we have about 250,000 Russians in Berlin living here. 250,000. Now, I have yet to hear about discrimination of Russians here. On the contrary, what I see here is a lot of Russian Ukrainian talk between Russian artists, Ukrainian artists. You know, they're really trying their very best because so this is my what I see, because they are not at war. Russia invaded Ukraine from their point of view, from a general agreed point of view. And but the Russians and the Ukrainians in Berlin don't see that they now need to fight a war here over that. And finally, the German population is experiencing the first consequences of the boycotts. We're experiencing that. So this is how we're involved in this war. We weren't asked. I mean, it was Putin that has given the order to invade the Ukraine. Nobody was asked if we would agree, and that's the nature of war. So, yeah.
I have questions regarding Germany and Germany's stance that I will come back to. But first, I want to start with Sergei. I remember we had on Tuesday an informal conversation where we touched a few topics, but I want that to be addressed today during this program because now we have the audience that actually asked those questions, and then we will move on to the poll that we had on our Grey Lounge YouTube community, where I had put 3 questions in the past few weeks when the whole situation erupted. But my first question is, I look at things more on the economy side of the globe and the shift of economy, and because now the way I see it, it's even the global warfare, the mechanism of war has shifted more towards economical warfare than more than anything else. So my question to you, Sergei, would be, now that when Russia decides to shift from dollar to yuan, and this is not just I mean, it's not just an immediate thing. It has a buildup of its own. It has been going on for some time now, and since the second term of Putin, things actually were quite visible that his stance is quite clear in terms of how Russia should now start to build its position on the global scale in terms of an economical, and this is what he takes with pride, the way he has lifted the economy of Russia. So now when Russia shifts towards the China side of the economical power game, do you think that having a far more economically powerful partner like China, is it going to be safe in the long run for Russia to change to yuan, shift to yuan, and knowing that China, we have to see that it is far more powerful economically than most countries currently on the planet. So how does what do you think? How does he see this when he takes this decision, considering China's position?
Well, it's a very good question, Xubi. And we know that in politics and in economics, we don't have friendships. Friendships disappear. So I think what I'd like to bring into my answer, and I'm going to. I don't have a firm answer. I'm not a financial specialist. I cannot give you a standing of Russian government. I can only give you my perspective. And therefore, I think what I would like to bring into it, as I form my opinion talking to you right now, I think we need to bring few other aspects, and one of them is alliances. and independence of countries. And what we've seen in the past, countries wanted to be allied with the United States as most powerful militarily and economically. But we also have seen that alliances being abused, because as a lesser partner, you don't have a bargaining power against the big brother. So what do you do? And that is the question that a lot of countries are asking. What are we going to do? And again, I think they are sitting in a paradigm: which side do we need to take? And really, in a model that is evolving now, I think, in the world, it's more focused on countries' interests. And I'll give you an example. Well, your country, for example, you know it better than me, but being involved in Afghan war brought some benefits to Pakistan, but also brought a lot of disasters. You know, the terrorism came into the country with lots of loss of life. So it is a political decision which affects entire country. When Russia over the last 30 years have been trying to align itself with Europe and United States, to the great disadvantages of the country. A lot of natural wealth of the country was traded for pitiful statements, political statements by Yeltsin. Yeltsin wanted to have backing of Clinton at the time, and so a lot of Russian wealth went to United States, and gates were open to exploitation of Russians. And during that time, during early 90s to early 2000, Russia lost about half what it's lost in World War II. Disadvantaged people. And it wasn't brain drain. It was actually death of most vulnerable people in Russian society, and people experience horrendous consequences of early stage of capitalism, where rapid acquisition of wealth went on in a very aggressive way. So that experience of recent years, Russians remember really well. And so, but also guys in the Middle East, when Western and especially United States talk about democracy, people look up in the sky. Where are the bombs going to come from? So again, that democratic model has really in crisis at the moment, because what we have within countries, we have established ways of democracies, and they work, multiple parties, and you've got power distribution and so on and so on. However, when it comes out of the country's border, democracy disappears as fast as a smoke. That's it. And we got a really relying more countries. We see countries relying on a brute force. And United States is really good and really powerful at that aspect. So what I think Russia is doing now, being hurt during those 30 years and taking account of what was happening and learning from that, Russia is choosing to move to a different model, and it wants to build different relationships with partners. Now, relying on China, we see a lot of personal relationships between Putin and Xi Jinping. Yes, they are friendly, but as I said, we cannot trust friendships in politics. But what Putin, for example, is proclaiming that he is considering interests of Russia and Russian people first. To what extent that's going to happen, I do not know. Going to yuan, well, it is obvious choice. If it's not US dollar, Russian ruble is not standing on its own. At the same time, I know there are some plans to back up currencies by gold. So if that is happening, we have totally new financial system in the world. Going back to yuan, what is Russia losing? I think it may lose that economic bargaining power because of difference in size. And as I mentioned before, a lesser partner is getting abused. And I can see examples of that coming through now, where Russian resources, for example, being bought by Chinese at the chips, you know, at the price of and I think Russia will adjust to that as well. And it's not just China. Okay, it's yuan, but it's not just China. It's close neighbors. It's those close neighbors on the east that, taking into account geographical closeness and historical alliances and common history that we have, and knowledge of partners is quite deep. I mean, we have been trading and living together border to border over a long period of time. And so I think reliance on close countries and their independence and bringing yuan is kind of making more stable model in Russian economic relationships. That's as far as probably I can go, Xubi. I can just throw this up as a thought for our guests to comment.
Okay, yeah. See, that part, Pakistan, looking at it from a Pakistani perspective, Pakistan has a very close relationship with China over the past many years now. And there was a time when Pakistan had the chance to build relationships with Russia, but instead it opted for the US, and it paid a very hefty price for that. And it's a perpetual loss that Pakistan has faced because of that blunder that now we can say in current time we could say that, but at that time probably it was a decision for the government to make, and it did, and probably at that time it even sounded okay. So now at this in 2022, sitting on a podcast, I can safely say that, but at that time it was probably the best choice possible for the president or the prime minister of that time. But now that Pakistan looks at China, and China has a relationship with Russia, and we noticed Imran Khan also visiting Russia and met Putin right on the day when this whole situation erupted. That kind of goes to show that since Imran Khan took charge of his position, Biden and Khan both have yet actually to make a phone call to each other, so they are not on very friendly grounds. And but amidst all this, because you know, I have been preparing our audience about certain things that are in the offing. We can clearly see that in 2023, Turkey and Saudi Arabia are supposed to either extend the 100-year contract of Mecca and Medina, or Turkey is supposed to take it back. And I'm pretty sure that if Turkey wants it back, it will have to take it by means of power more than anything else. So the stance of MBS and all that situation is quite evident, and it's taking us to the very visible and predictable situation. So given this and the stance of Pakistan on this conflict, this current conflict, is that the Prime Minister of Pakistan has urged Putin to try to solve this more on a diplomatic table than a war zone, which will cause loss of life more than anything else, and the whole situation is actually getting out of hand. But now that we have Mushin also here, and because Germany is one of those countries which actually takes the responsibility of the whole EU, if not fully, but the majority of it after Brexit, and knowing that the German economy is on which the whole EU is actually banking on. And with this Nord Stream 2 being cut off, and the whole economic backlash that Germany will face, my question to you, Mushin, would be, how do you see, what's the public opinion on, because when the Nord Stream 2 is shut off, we have to see 10 years ahead. Russia being one of the largest oil producers and gas exporters after the US, and suddenly the whole relationship goes down, the whole contract goes down. Because I will, after you answer this, I will go to my other part of the question, where which will be kind of a stiff question for you to answer, but I would want you to answer that. But how do you see this whole backlash of economy, knowing that the first question that I put to Sergei, that China is now becoming the leading economy for this side, which has partnered with China in a relationship, more of a friendly relationship than anything else. How do you see Germany and the public opinion, not Angela Merkel's opinion, but public opinion? How do you see the backlash of this Russian conflict?
What you have to, I mean, one thing is Merkel has gone, right? She's gone, but 16 years or 18, I think it was, year of governance, being re-elected again and again, that does something with the world and everybody. So we have a new government, which, sorry, a new government that is the Social Democrats, the Green Party, and the Liberal Party. Now, the Liberal Party in Germany is not like Anglo-Saxon Liberal Party. They're actually liberals in the sense of looking at the world liberally and saying everybody has to take their own responsibility. Anyway, so they would be, you would call them as a kind of conservative. Anyway, so this German government represents a large part of Germany. And basically, here, the narrative is very simple. The narrative is of war and of an invasion. So that's the narrative. Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine didn't invade Russia. So, that's the narrative. And economically, now, Germany, ever since the end of the Cold War, and as an aside, I'm going to say something to Sergei. I'm going to say the Russians never understood that they lost the Cold War. They lost it. The end of the Soviet Union was a result of the loss of the Cold War. Now, I don't mind, you see, because all the time when I was in Berlin, prior to the fall of the wall, and even for a long time after that, it was very clear to every progressive German, America was the fault of everything. And that narrative hasn't changed really. So it's always American imperialism and so on. So that's like a large narrative. In Berlin, there's a special narrative because the Americans actually kept the Russians out of West Berlin, the Russians or the Soviet Union. So here I make the same mistake that that many people make, is to take Russia and Soviet Union as the same thing. They're not. Russia is something else, and Russia needed to redefine itself after the Soviet Union lost the Cold War. And as far as I can see, the narrative has also, the progressive narrative in the West has been that American companies came and robbed Russians, and to which I'd simply ask, which of the Russian oligarchs is American? So, Russia is not ruled by Americans as far as I know, and so America as the one that did everything wrong and was an imperialist is a narrative that I have learned to let go of in the last 15 to 20 years. So in Germany, basically, we're on the side of the Ukraine. The heroic Ukraine fighting a bad oppressor that comes and takes away the country. So that's the German narrative, and people generally buy into it. I mean, you also need to know that we already have something like 300,000 Ukrainian refugees, to which we respond, like you said, Raza, in which the response was like we had the welcoming thing in when was the beginning of the Syrian war, and then that kind of totally crashed, and so we have this large anti-immigration movement, and all of a sudden this changed because of the poor Ukrainians. Now, I mean, the Europeans, we also had a similar approach to refugees from the Yugoslav wars that led to all these states in the former Yugoslav country. So, given that Germany, after the end of the Cold War, has led a long politics of what now, in hindsight, looks like appeasement of Russia. I mean, we like Nord Stream 2 was basically a project of German oligarchs and Russian oligarchs trying to sell us gas. Basically, that was basically it. And they had an old German chancellor in the mix who was kind of pushing that agenda. And there would have been no way to stop Nord Stream 2 unless you start a war. So that the end of Nord Stream 2 is really the consequence of the war. I mean, nobody in their sane economic mind wanted that. Now, the exchange between Germany as a European hegemon that didn't want to be hegemon in the past, but now has risen to the occasion and actually started to utterly change the politics. You must know, I mean, one of the consequences, which are really harsh and difficult to carry, is that we'll put 100 billion in the German army in the next decade, I think it is, what this is planned for, which we have always avoided. Germany has always avoided to spend money for military, to spend money for NATO, Trump has been scolding us and saying the Americans are going to leave Europe if Germany doesn't pay up. So, so anyway, and we were pretty happy about that. And this in the German public has utterly changed. And which makes me extremely happy about the European Union, which kind of is very firm in saying we're not going to go into that war, where we're going to support the Ukraine defending itself. That's what the European Union says. And Germany, in spite of Poland really pushing Germany, trying to push Germany into this war, because basically it's some Polish border, right? Yesterday, a rocket came into 7 miles from Poland. So, Germany is really trying to stop it there, including NATO, which is saying we don't want to be involved in that war because there's going to be consequences. You see, the rockets that now fly to Kiev, it's just a very short distance further to Lviv, where day before yesterday, rockets came. And that's a very short distance from Slovakia, Czech Republic, from Poland, from Romania.
That takes me to a question that I want to ask Raza by you. Why? Because Blinken a week ago gave an outright statement on behalf of NATO, as if as if the U.S. actually is NATO itself, and gave a green light to Poland for the airstrike into Russia. Now you are looking at things from two perspectives, Raza Bhai. You are a Pakistani and you are also a Britain brought up, raised person. So you know the Britain psychology, you know the Pakistani, overseas Pakistani psychology. You have to have two minds in this, in any case. So how do you see Blinken dictating the NATO for allowing airstrikes into Russia and these sort of rockets flying in all of a sudden? What is when would this concept actually come out in the open of what the stance of United States and Britain actually is, and how do you see it?
This is typically your US. They don't have the stomach to fight Russia themselves. Simple as that, and they have to fight them through these proxy wars. Okay, geographically, these countries are at the front line, so they have to. But it's the US pushing them forward, on their behalf. And as always, the US are saying, yes, we're right behind you. We're right behind you. We'll support you. And then when the crunch comes, they're not always there to be seen. Or when their purpose is served, they are very quick to move. And like I mentioned, we saw it all in Afghanistan, where the Afghan government were supported for many, many years. Billions of dollars were poured into it. And then suddenly, all of a sudden, the Americans abandoned them and left them. From a Pakistani perspective, I see this, the dynamics in play quite differently, because Pakistan have always supported the Americans. And this time round, Pakistan are taking a different stance, because they're saying, well, we are independent. We will look out for the best interest for Pakistan. And that doesn't mean that we have to take the sides with the Americans or side with the Russians. We just want to remain neutral, which is in the best interest of Pakistan anyway. Pakistan has suffered horrendous losses during the Afghan situation, where something like 90,000 people have given their lives for it. The influx of the Afghan refugees, Pakistan have taken millions of them within Pakistan, which has had severe consequences on the economy as well. And this time around, Pakistan stood up to the Americans and said, no, we don't want to just fall in your trap and do whatever you order us to do. We've got independent minds. We want to think for ourselves. But the irony, you know, as always, look what India has done in Kashmir. They invaded the country. They've caused huge problems there. And why is the world not responding to this? Where is the UN in this crisis? We've seen historically all the issues within Palestine. You know, the irony of the Israelis standing up now and as an invading country, as a force that has been attacking the Palestinians for years upon years, and not abiding by international law, whichever international law or norms that you may sort of put down. Where is the world police? Where is the world, you know, to speak up for this this crisis? You know, I find the whole hypocrisy of it all, you know, so crazy.
Do you see? I have two questions. Do you see in Britain a public opinion where they would say that we want an end to this proxy wars and sending our troops and sending our kids and children out on other territories and being butchered and or butchering others, and do you see a public opinion going against this finally, or do you think that they are still following BBC, Fox News, Sky News, and CNN?
Yeah, at the moment there isn't this big strive to send the forces in. You know, this craziness hasn't started yet. What we've seen is this downtrodden, poor Ukrainians who, you know, their country has been overtaken and they see the movement of refugees out of there. So all of that is being played out. There is this sort of slow build-up, and we've seen it recently with the oligarchs and their assets being frozen all of a sudden. You know, the classic case of the Chelsea owner, you know, Chelsea Football Club, you know, being taken over by the government.
That does not make sense.
And it's not long ago, and people have very short memories, where all these people were being invited into the country because they were bringing their wealth into the country, and it would be good for the economy and whatever, you know, and they were being welcomed with open arms.
To this level, they now to this level.
Yeah. So, you know, we're seeing all of this at the moment, but I think, God forbid that we actually go into a full-scale war where we're having to send soldiers in. I think that would be a terrible sort of point, because at the end of the day, it's the human cost, you know, with the suffering that will go on at all levels.
Raza bhai, one question to you. I have one more question to you before we move to the other questions. Now that you have seen, we have all witnessed wars, and now we are shifting to the modern generation of biowarfare. We will come to those questions that I have for Sergei. But do you see the collapse of the dollar hegemony, finally dollar coming down, and the fall of the empire of the United States, and taking with it the United Kingdom?
I think it's inevitable. I think, you know, this fall of the US dollar is a matter of time rather than, you know, is it going to happen? I think it is. I think, you know, the Chinese bloc, the Russian, you know, they're very powerful groups now. And, you know, the Americans are deluded if they think that they are the only people, the only game in town. You know, this is the new world order that we've been talking about. You know, it was going to happen at some stage, And this could be the trigger point. This could be the catalyst towards that. But I think it's going to happen. Unfortunately, the UK just follows suit with the Americans blindly. And I think that they do need to take independent viewpoints, and they do need to look out for themselves, because they will be used and abused by the Americans as always.
Okay. So that is I noticed some nods of the head all around when you said that the collapse of the great empire, once great empire of the United States, is inevitable and quite evident now. But we had a poll. I have been mentioning that on our community panel on our Grey Lounge group, where I had put 3 questions. I'm just gonna first put these questions across, and we could after. I mean, you would. It's very evident when you get to hear the questions, you would know the majority had quite similar answers to what we all are going to come up with. But I would want a quick review of everyone on this. The first poll was: do you see, amidst this Ukraine Russia conflict, do you see that this may erupt into a World War III? Sergei, we will start from you.
Well, I think there is a high probability that we will. That is my my feeling. When I hear Mushin talking about Germany siding with Ukraine as a peaceful country offended by Russians, I think Mushin is actually within that cloud of opinion. But I apologize, but I have to. And I know when you said that, you knew that I'm going to respond, and I cannot remain silent about it. And I want to ask. I'm not going to lash out, and I'm just going to ask a few questions. Do you know that neo-Nazis in Ukraine take key positions in government and military? That's one question. Second question. Do you know that neo-Nazi ideology is perpetrated by 16% of Ukrainian people, predominantly on the western side of Ukraine? 16. Another question. Do you know that those people that left Ukraine are most likely affiliated with neo-Nazi views, most likely, and have some power structures and financial structure to support their opinion? And with the shift in Germany towards building its military force, don't you see that those 300,000 or near that can actually cause revival of Nazi movement in Germany, which is already has brewing some of the sentiments. And don't you think that these things, poor Ukraine, when you say poor Ukraine, do you remember Zelensky Munich speech when he had standing ovation? And in that speech, he said that if European Union is not going to help Ukraine, he's going to abandon Budapest Agreement. That means non-nuclear status for Ukraine. And when he said that, then he followed it and said that they are going to go and develop nuclear weapons. Now, Ukraine is not, I don't want to be diminishing other countries, but it's not Uganda. It has scientific base, it has military base, It has former Soviet Union industrial base to deliver those. It has a nuclear power industry. Don't you think that that statement of Zelensky and standing ovation of everybody present actually sealed his fate? Because Russia cannot take that kind of dirty bomb arrangements next to its territories. I mean, we've got to be realistic. How would you, what would you do with your infected tooth? You have to extract it. There is no point of liberal discussion about it and talking to your tooth and saying, well, you know, you think you better start working, you know, otherwise I will apply some sanctions and I will just do this and this and this. You know, you've got to do something. And I think Russia has done that. And the goals were stated of that conflict. They were stated from the beginning. I'm not saying that Russia is right. I'm just asking those questions, and I hope you know the answers, because I don't. Now, going to your question, just looking at that situation right now, I see that war is a very profitable thing. A major benefactor of the war, especially with the collapse of US currency, is going to be United States. And here I'm really concerned about possible provocations in other parts of the world. For example, Taiwan. The more dollar falls, the more instability US economy gets as a result of that. We'll see all sorts of possible scenario playing in Europe, but also in Asia, and Taiwan is one of them. And so there will be some provocations there. So I think taking that into account, I can say that unfortunately, but I think hot conflict is going to be something that we'll witness.
Okay, Sergei, that was a nice return. Because yes, I knew it was.
Before you answer Sergei's question, do answer the poll question first.
Yes. Well, I was much more afraid of this turning into a major conflict because we are going to notice it immediately. The Australians may not, so they may feel a little bit more safe when they say this is going to be a major conflict. But anyway, I don't think so. I'm absolutely amazed at NATO refusing the Polish airplanes and really refusing any type of escalation that is that could draw NATO into this conflict directly, because in Europe, we know what then is going to happen. We had a Cold War, which was nothing but this kind of stuff. I mean, you know, the propaganda, the information, blah, whatever you want to call it, this kind of conversation, pre-war conversation. So, forgive me if I don't see that. I don't believe it. I don't want to believe it. Wake me up when the Third World War starts. So that is quite clear to me. I mean, nobody is really interested in that. Nobody really wants that. I mean, the whole point of the Cold War was to have a buffer between Western Europe and the Soviet Union. That whole Warsaw Pact was like a buffer, you know, so to keep us apart. And that has broken down, and that has led to this extremely dangerous situation. Now, regarding Nazis in government, when have Nazis in government? I mean, I'm going to enter into if they are or if they aren't in a little while. But whenever has a right-wing government or a Nazi government been the grounds on which another nation nearby, a neighbor, invaded? I don't know about that. Next point. 16% of Nazis in the Ukraine. Well, yeah, we have about that kind of numbers in Germany. If you kind of are leaning to the
I have
Nazi.
to interrupt here. Don't you think that the NATO invaded Afghanistan on similar grounds of having a fundamentalist extremist in Afghanistan?
I don't know. You may be right. It was a really, thank you for correcting that view. Yeah, thank you. You're right. Yeah, yeah, true.
I
Yes.
want to
Anyway,
okay. Remind
Yeah,
the Colin Powell exercise at the United Nations, an invasion of Iraq, on the presumption of weapons of mass destruction. Sorry.
Okay, I stand corrected. I was just thinking about Europe, but of course, if I broaden my horizon, you're correct. Okay, so then we could accept that as a valid reason to invade a country. So then Russia is just following America in this narrative. So then Russia is just following America in the way in which they used to invade countries. But on the fact in and of itself, it seems ironic that Zelensky, a Jew whose father was killed in the Shoah, would be the head of a Nazi government. That kind of is so incredibly implausible that we don't even want to talk about it. I do know about the right-wing forces in the Ukrainian army. I think there's 2 or 3 battalions which are clearly right-wing in what they say, although if I know Nazis well, they love their symbols. So it's extremely, so there may be Nazis in government. I was gonna ask which ones. I mean, so name the persons so I can do some research. But anyway, so that's the Nazi thing. And then the Zelensky speech, finally, that seems to be so infuriating, or seems to have been so infuriating that it led to an invasion. So I'm quite aware of what Zelensky said, but I'm also quite aware of what the other parties in this conflict said. And when they said it, I could give you a timeline who generally, because I was trying to find out what is the fucking goal of this war? I mean, what does this war want to do? Except satisfy Putin's desire to replace the government in the Ukraine. He did basically what he wants to do, as far as I understand it, is to demilitarize, to replace the government, and to make the Ukraine a neutral country like, say, Sweden or Austria. And all these things, I'm quite okay with that. Frankly, I think it makes total sense to have a neutral buffer state between Russia and NATO members. It really makes sense. So then you have Belarus and the Ukraine as kind of
the answer
buffer
to
states.
the answer to these questions will come in the other 2 questions of the poll, but yeah.
Sorry for taking so long. Yeah.
No, that's okay. But because the discussion is going towards another angle altogether, and I know Sergei is full of a lot of answers to all these questions that you have, and but we have 2 more questions in the poll that will answer this particular thing, that why has Russia initiated this. So let's first, I would want Raza Bhai's opinion on the first poll of the World War III and his opinion. Then we will move to question 2, and you will definitely get the answer, I believe so, in those other 2 questions.
I think it's similar to what Mushin was saying. I don't see this going into a World War III situation, or I pray it doesn't go through. I think we will be taken to the brink, as always, and then people will see sense and pull back. Because I think as a community worldwide, I don't think the appetite to go into war soon after the conflicts in Iraq, or people are just not geared up for it. People just don't have that appetite to go into a war on this particular occasion. So I sincerely hope that we don't fall into this trap and go fully pledged into a outright conflict. So I don't see it happening.
Okay, so Sergei is of the opinion that it might. Mushin and Raza Bhai, you think it may not, and I would add to this that I believe that it should. The way things, my opinion is that it should turn into the World War III, because if why I say this is because with this green light from Blinken to the airstrikes into Russia. And then a few days ago, amidst this this charade, India fires a rocket into Pakistan accidentally, as they say, and the Pakistan military has to bring it down halfway through its process, and then India kind of diplomatically sent an apology. So I believe the situation in Syria, the situation now erupting between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, this Ukraine-Russia conflict, this NATO gearing up and siding with the United States and Britain, and India now testing its tiny little missiles just into Pakistan, just so that they can see how well their bigger guns can work. So I believe things. My opinion is that things should finally open up into a situation where at least the blocks that they are forming should now finally show their faces and say that, okay, this is the situation. If we want to get into a full-blooded world war, then these are the countries which are together, and these are the countries which are not. I sincerely hope that it does erupt into a world war, not because I'm a pro-war person or a warmonger. It's because I believe as a Pakistani, this is the first time a Pakistan government is taking a very firm stance to where it stands. So I think now the shift of powers will end up in some sort of a flare. It will not just silently fizzle out like it just happened and nothing happened. It's not an ego thing going on. It's not that Putin is losing his respect. I think he came with a plan this time around when he took charge for the second term and the previous term. And I think he noticed that he is not being heard. The Minsk agreement, for instance, in 2014, and made and ridiculed again in 2015 and not followed up. I think it was enough for him to take. It is enough for Pakistan also to take. China has shown its power economically, and I think I would want to see finally, okay, yes, there's going to be a loss of life and economic loss for everybody. I think a country like Pakistan cannot even sustain a war for more than 3 to 7 days, financially, economically. But at least I would, in my lifetime, I would want to see a major shift where we know who we are, where we stand, what were we living for, what were our morals, and when did we actually give up, and when did we actually stand for it, and what made us what we are today, and what will make our next generations of what we want them to be. I mean, as a person, I would want this to finally erupt. That's my personal opinion. The second question was, which is going to also answer a few questions that all of us may have. Was the invasion of Russia justified on the basis of the so far 37 identified bio-warfare laboratories spotted in Ukraine? Or was it still not justified despite having located those laboratories? That was the question. Sergei, we will start from you, and then we will take it from there.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you, Xubi. Well, I'm going to be biased, of course, as all of us. I just want to refer to my colleagues when they express their opinion about war. They actually based their opinion, and I quote, on things like, I believe, I pray, I do not want to see. That has nothing to do with reality. It has to do with what we as individuals, and I'm sorry that I'm pointing that out, but I think we've got to kind of look at it at a more independent, and I'm not saying that I'm independent by all means, but at the same time, if I take Mushin's perspective and saying science is the holder of truth, there is no place in science for statements like that. So, okay, we'll just next question. Was it justified? We can't. Okay, what were the options? And I suppose what I'm doing, I'm leading to my answer yes. So the short answer is yes. And what were the options? To talk about that it's not very nice to do that, to point out that you are actually violating an international law, to start a discussion about how naughty it is for United States to make contracts with countries like China, Georgia, Ukraine, and other countries to actually place the contracts of biological research in those countries. And Ukraine perhaps didn't have any clue on what it's doing. I give it benefit of the doubt, but because what they did, they sent results to US, and some of the results went to Australia and other countries. But at the same time, if this is happening, and Minsk has shown for 8 years since 2014 no results, and stalling of any discussion, negotiation, democratic process, what do? You have imminent danger at your doorstep. I suppose Russia could have sent some rockets to Cuba again, or placed them in Venezuela, provided Guaido would say okay to that. And I'm sure United States would not ask Guaido, is it okay for Russians to send rockets to Venezuela? Guys, I think I know why Russia did that. In my psyche, in my belief, I think it is a justified step. It's like killing of Soleimani. Was it a justified step? To me, it was a horrendous violation of international law. To the extent that pursuing Osama bin Laden on Pakistan territory, I mean, and then celebrating it and you know, being jubilous. Look, something is wrong. My set of values, when we are talking about values now, more than anything else, is kind of doesn't allow me as a person to accept that reality being portrayed as normal. So could Russia just fix those laboratories with high precision weapons? Perhaps yes. But it did what it did. And I think in hindsight, and also what Russia claims now, that Ukraine was ready for advancement onto Donetsk and Lugansk, I think it is justified. That's my opinion.
Well, let me say that there's like for me, there's like a scale of justifications. Morally, war is never justified. Very simple. You know, if I have a quarrel with my neighbor, I don't go shooting his aunt. You know, I simply so I'm applying that very simple moral and ethics. War is never justified. Now, regarding this bio war, it seems to be too cooked up for me. I mean, if this war was really justifiable by these bio laboratories, I'm quite sure they would have done the Colin Powell thing. You know, I mean, you know, why not do it? Because I mean, bioweapons are such a huge taboo everywhere. You know, why not do that? So it seems to be cooked up. Because if you come with something 2 weeks after you start a war, which you said, I mean, on the day before the invasion started, was to make sure that these two republics, which are only recognized by, I think, Russia and North Korea. I don't know if China even recognizes them. Anyway, so, you know, these two republics, they were going to make sure that the evil Ukrainian military were not going to do that. So these are the things that were being said to justify the war. And now the bio war thing comes in. So anyway, I don't think the war is justified. I'm against bio war weapons, but I know everybody makes them. I'm against, you see, so the point really that seems to get lost in this whole conversation is this is a war of oligarchs in the West against oligarchs in the East. And as always, it is the people, and by now it's 3 million as far as we know, those are refugees, 3 million refugees, and many more people are suffering. Just because some oligarchs want to push some pieces around. Now, this is so to make it a problem of American imperialism, because what is that? That's American oligarchs in industry and the military industrial complex and all those things I'm not naive about. You know, it seems people think that because I don't buy the Russian story, I would buy the Western story. Like I said, the first casualty of war is truth. And what is left is arguments which we are ready to fight about in a scale of this. Now, Russia was willing to fight for their arguments with the war. It's very simple. So it doesn't really, you know, if they are justified or not, according to what. So just Russia feels justified to do this. I can only say, well, I don't think so, but it doesn't really matter what I think. It really doesn't matter what I think. And it really doesn't matter what the population in the Ukraine thinks or the population in Russia thinks. I don't mind all these polls of those. So really, it is not a war of the Russian people against the West or the Russian people against the Ukrainian people. It's an oligarch's war. And if I understand Russian military well enough, the conscripts don't really like their life. So I mean, it's like with all the soldiers. I actually, during Vietnam War, I was part of a pipeline of American soldiers to go into Sweden and to Switzerland. So so I know a little bit about the psychology of soldiers. So really, no. And then there's this one thing about realism versus beliefs. I think so. From my point of view, the Russian beliefs are totally, absolutely irrealistic, have nothing whatsoever to do with any kind of reality I personally can recognize. So, so I think they are placing their war on those ideas, which I think are really major beliefs. As do, I think Putin thinks we have some major beliefs, and because we have them, he has to act like that. I understand all that. So I'm not an enemy of Putin. I'm enemy of an oligarch system that thinks war is justifiable. And sorry, I'm not talking, not saying that Sergei, your justification was wrong, or or that was somehow ethical.
I'm not an oligarch either.
Yeah, exactly. So so and in this whole constellation of war of oligarchs, I don't think that a world war would be a cleaning kind of occasion as you seem to think, Xubi. So I don't see that. I know what the consequence of the Second World War was in all of Europe. You probably know what the consequences of the Pakistani-Indian wars were for the Indian people and the Pakistani people. And even though I'm personally much more on the side of Pakistan than on the side of India, so so it's really a conundrum. War is a psychological rape of humanity. Really, that's how I feel it. It's not rape in the sexual sense, but rape in taking out the guts and going for the guts of the people. So really what it is doing is taking away my friends Raza has these friends in the Ukraine. They don't like it. They have to send their families into and I don't think that the family of the Russian soldiers like it. So yeah. So basically, that's the point. And now, what could Russia has done differently? I don't know. What what Germany did with the DDR. We considered that part of Germany. Everybody else didn't somehow, and so we kind of we said change by economics. So we pumped tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of money into the GDR, huge amounts of money, and then after that, even more amounts of money. So Russia could have put huge amounts of money in helping Ukraine develop, doing trade, but really, they could have, but they didn't. So, so anyway, that's the point there.
I think just to answer the question, was it justified because of the biological labs, suspected biological or confirmed biological labs. You know, what's the difference?
Funded by the US.
Yeah, yeah.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. So what's the difference between what the US and the Allies did going into Iraq, where they suspected weapons of mass destruction?
They showed it before. It was the reason of the war, and this
exactly
isn't. So, yeah, sorry.
But, you know, if it hadn't been the biological labs, it would have been something else. The build-up towards this invasion has been going on for years, you know, since the 90s. You know, the supply of arms, the budget for the military has increased from 1% to something like 7% within Ukraine over a period of time, whereas those funds could be used to feed the poor. You know, the economic situation in Ukraine had been on a downward slope. The biggest export out of Ukraine has been the people. You know, the people have been moved over for economic reasons. So I think it was inevitable. I think, was it justifiable? To a certain extent, yes, because, you know, Russia on its doorstep sees all this buildup, sees all this potential problems emerging, which could have a spillover to the Russian side. So yeah, I can see it to a certain extent. No war is justifiable. I think, you know, there's always room for diplomacy, discussion, being able to talk to one another. And it's a very sad situation, because it's the general public, it's the people on the ground that suffer. And you know, what value do we have on these lives? That's the, you know, that's a huge sort of conundrum, like Mushin said. But nowhere is justifiable. But if it hadn't been for this, it would have been some other reason. And this was, you know, a time bomb ticking away, waiting to happen over, I would say, at least 10 years.
Okay, so you say not justifiable. And the funny thing is that I'm going to have to, again, think like Sergei. I think the only reason why so far in these two questions so far in these two questions, why I think we both fall on the same side is mainly because you know, we over this past few hour or more of podcasts, what I've noticed is that we have a totally different stance towards this conflict than Raza Bhai, you and Mushin. And I totally respect your stance because you are talking about loss of life, and we both seem to be talking about collateral damage, which is not the case. We are not talking about it in that sense, but it comes out as if this loss of life is just mere collateral damage for the greater cause behind a man's mission or a nation's mission. But I would say the only reason why it's to me is justified that Russia would invade Ukraine on the basis of the allegedly US-funded biowarfare laboratories is because I believe when it comes to a situation where a neighboring country, which was at one time a province of the greater USSR, turns against you to a level that is pretty evident, because we have to keep in mind that the collapse of USSR took place in quite a similar fashion, and it was not even in the books. It was not even in the forecast or any prediction whatsoever at one point that this could happen. where forces would unite at neutral territory and bring down one of the greatest unities on the planet, and it did. And Pakistan is facing the consequences of that. Afghanistan is facing the consequences of that. And the only people benefiting and enjoying the perks of that are United States and Great Britain. And USSR has to keep that. Russia has to keep in mind how USSR was also targeted by these forces uniting at a neutral territory and cooking some sort of a war, which could have erupted any time. And if I believe if Putin hadn't done it, Ukraine would have been used as a neutral territory by these forces, and they would have done it brought it upon Russia anytime now, anytime soon. Because, and this is I'm just going to say to that. The third question, and it's a very simple question that we had on the poll, that would United States ever allow a biowarfare laboratory funded by the Russians to be placed in Mexico or Canada or any neighboring site of its country? And how would it react if it finds out something similar?
I assume it's my turn. I think even on suspicion of a biological lab or plans of a biological lab being placed in a neighboring country, the United States would have acted with major force. I don't have any doubts, and the reason for it, I think that in the current situation, which is very different to 1961, where Caribbean crisis was just in full blast. So the power distribution there was different. US had more nuclear weapons, Russia had fewer nuclear weapons, but there was no complexity of this kind that we have now. And so, but also United States didn't have at the time 500 military bases around the globe. It didn't. I
would say 800. The stats are somewhere 800.
Okay, sorry, I'm just not up to date. So having that power, United States in recent time allowed itself to elect presidents for independent countries like Venezuela, saying, well, you know, Maduro is not good. Well, take Guaido. What kind of international laws do we have to allow that to happen? Or bombing of Belgrade? That's real cool, isn't it? We believe it's quite different to what you have done as Ukraine bombing Eastern republics, Eastern those provinces, and killing civilians, finding that there is now Russian forces in that. You know, about 14,000 civilians were killed in that conflict. Now, we kind of don't hear that, and that goes towards hypocrisy point that Raza made before. So taking all that into account, I think United States would have reacted swiftly and in full blast. And if we are talking about not a single laboratory, but a set of laboratories, let's say a network of laboratories, that would have been, we would have seen full blast invasion of that country by United States. So that's a simple answer.
I'd like to get back to that just a little bit. So where's the proof about these biological laboratories? Where are where are the evil germs from that laboratory? If they were there, don't you think? Wait a minute. If they were there, don't you think they would have been produced like Colin Powell produced his
Yeah,
proof?
I was gonna say these labs are right next to the WMDs placed in Iraq.
Yeah.
But so don't you think it would be like a major propaganda tool in this war, which is always a propaganda war as well? Um, so why weren't these proofs produced during the United Nations session, where all nations except I think 5 or 6 said, we don't like this. We don't want Russia to do boo boo boo. Anyway, so why? I mean, if you can at that moment produce proof, I mean, that would shut up at least 1/3 of these countries. So, so there is this. So this is the situation. I'm not gonna say what I believe, although it comes out, I think, through what I'm saying. But so anyway, so a justification, I think, a justification can be made out of that alleged thing. It should come with proof, but maybe they're producing those now. So. Um, uh, um, yeah, yeah. Um, and so what I hear a lot from Sergei and Xubi from YouTube. So I'm really happy that you produced that, because I think then we can address that. I call that whataboutism. It is saying, well, Russia did this, but what about America there? Um, Russia probably, maybe somehow may have done this, but what about America doing this and this and that? And now we know, like I said before, I mean, those of us who were politically interested during the time of the Cold War and after, um, we have seen that Russia, once it is unfettered, does it just like the US. So Georgia, Crimea, blah, 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 they define their interests and then act according to their interests. I think um, that's why I'm talking about a war of oligarchs, why I'm talking about that particular thing is, yeah, what about this? Sure. America has been an imperialist nation starting wars all over the globe. Not all over the globe, but where their interests were and where they wanted assets and stuff, oil, blood for oil. I marched in one of these big ones, saying the US shouldn't start wars over oil or robbing people. Anyway, um, uh, so Russia is behaving just like the US has been behaving for the last for forever, basically, And then do we want to say that China could just do like that? So China defines, let's say, that half of Pakistan is theirs, for because maybe the Russians or the Russians, no, the Americans are putting uh, bioweapons in that part of Pakistan. So China would be justified in coming in. India would be justified in coming in, or you would be justified in, rolling into India, taking down their biological laboratories because you may fear that they are producing bioweapons there. So, we're moving in a very slippery slope if we start to, if we move along the line of those arguments. That's what I'm saying. It's a consequence of using those types of arguments. So, whataboutism doesn't do it for me. I know that what the US has done. And as a matter of fact, like I said before, I have been involved in counter moves there, helping people who suffer from those things. So, yes, America did what it did. American people were all hooray for the Vietnam War, and then they were all boo after the hippies started to smoke a lot of dope there. So yeah, this is what happens. This is what happens, and I I don't I don't want to go into these arguments where we say, well, you know, Cuba and then the Ukraine, because that's whataboutism. We're not learning from history. You know, I mean, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, they are all very close to Russia, extremely close to Russia. Some of them actually bordering on Russia, and they have a different system, right?
What is your answer
So
to the question? Would US allow similar laboratories in Mexico or neighboring countries funded by Russia or China or Pakistan, for that matter?
they wouldn't start a war, I think. They would send in some of their Navy SEALs or something like that. At least I think they would do that. But, you know, no, of course they wouldn't tolerate those types of things. Sure. You know, I mean, yeah.
I think we're all
But
unified on this response, and I mean, I agree with what Sergei said. Even a sniff of a laboratory or any issue such as that on the border with the US, they would send in the force. They would, without a doubt, and a shadow of doubt in my mind, they would have sent in a force to go and eradicate it. And we've seen it, you know, with the drugs trade in Nicaragua, in some of the other countries. As soon as they have a issue, they just send in the force and try and remove them. So I think we're all unified on our response on that, on this particular case. Unless you have something different to say, once again, Xubi.
No, you know, I would agree with all of us that United States or any country would actually not want or allow. But just like Sergei said, they would, by the habit that they have, and we all know that Biden is a warmonger. So we know that he would have sent in all guns blazing to knock down not just the labs, but also the whole nation, for that matter, just to get every single thought out of the system against the United States of America. So I also believe that the United States would not allow that and would use all the force that it possibly can to eradicate such a concept within even the minds of people. But I want to come back to just one point which Mushin raised, where Mushin, you mentioned. In my answer, my response to the second question of the justification of the Russian invasion, I actually put forth a different argument. I personally believe that Ukraine was being used as a neutral territory to strengthen the presence, the military presence of United States and the NATO, just so that they could destabilize the growing military and advancements that Russia is very much capable of. And half the world uses Russian equipment to equip themselves for any sort of war that a country may face. And so this is not something that is easily digestible to all these forces. So I believe that this is not an invasion on the basis of just the biowarfare laboratories that they have identified. But as I said earlier, that this term, when Putin joined in, you might have noticed when Biden and Putin met in Switzerland, I guess, a few months ago. Firstly, Putin has a habit of making the guests wait for hours. And I think after an hour and a half somewhere, or 2 hours later, when Putin showed up, this conversation that they had was rather cold. and not just cold, but it was, I think it was a message between the lines by Putin that I'm not going to take any more dictation from anybody anymore because of the delay in the Minsk agreement, the overdue of all the responsibilities that were lying on other states who were actually asking for peace in the region, but they did not actually do anything in that regard. I mean, frankly speaking, I believe Russia should not now surrender. Why? Not because of any bio-warfare laboratories alone, but also because it is high time that see, I know your sentiments, Mushin, because I sadly, after the Holocaust, I know that even the German government currently has more of an apologetic attitude towards Israel, which does not even make sense to me. So when I see Ukrainian ambassador recruiting Israelis and sending them over to Ukraine as jihadis to fight against Russia, I mean, how is that allowed by any code of war or any code of conduct for that matter? Now, if these sort of unities can take place regardless of the background of the whole invasion and the conflict, then I think they're just trying to single out Russia. And believe you me, I personally think that Russia is not singled out anymore. I don't think Russia is banking on China. I believe China is also partially banking on Russia also, and likewise Pakistan. They want a control in the warm waters. They know that Pakistan had been an ally, a strong ally of the United States, but now with this shift, China is putting $40 billion of investment in Pakistan for the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and the United States has tried to put spanners in the system for years now, and through directly and also through MBS. Now, with this shift of the Pakistani stance, I think it is time, without any justification required, it is time for this bloc, Pakistan, China, Turkey, Iran, Malaysia, to unite and to stand tall now. If we all agreed that the hegemony of dollar is collapsing and going down, then it's time for someone to counteract and build some sort of a unity in the region, because these areas that I'm mentioning are the most critical geologically located countries that we are talking about, because not just because Russia is one of the highest gas exporter or oil producer after the United States, but also because Pakistan and Iran also share underground resources, which are very, very reliable for the coming years in terms of the balancing of economy in this region. And if this is supposed to happen, as I said in the first question about the World War III, I believe it should happen now. And not taking anything away from Germany, but Germany has to also, I believe, after Brexit, I think Germany has to take a stance and step out of this proxy war of all the NATO and all the United States driven issues, which Germany has nothing to do with. Germany has no interest whatsoever where Germany agrees to, when be it Afghanistan, be it Syria, be it Pakistan. I mean, this does not make sense to me. So I'm not just a follower of the whataboutism. I'm actually basing all this on the past 20, 30 years of invasions that we have seen in our areas. That's what I wanted to add to that. Yes, please, Sergei, you want to say something?
I actually want to expand on whataboutism. just to round it up. And I accept. I use logical arguments in construct my point of view, and what aboutism is part of the logical argument construction. So you must agree with that. But what I would like to point out that we cannot deny that these events are taking place now. They are actually engulfing more and more countries, destabilizing existing, and I'm sort of loosely calling it world order, including relationships between the countries. I don't mean world order kind of conspiracy type of theory. But what I'm saying, I suppose, is if we recognize this change that is in front of our eyes, we don't deny it, we participate in it as conscious individuals. And I do not know how conscious can you be when bombs are actually falling onto your head. I haven't had that experience, fortunately or unfortunately. But I think if we recognize that the changes is happening in front of our eyes, I truly believe that the wisdom of the conflict is going to come and cement a new, renewed relationship between countries. Not necessarily new world order, because I don't subscribe to Mushin's idea that, Russia lost Cold War, Soviet Union lost Cold War. That mentality, somebody lost Cold War, somebody won Cold War, and we know there is no
provocation was meant as a provocation. Just it was meant as a provocation. Just want to make sure.
Well, I sort of caught up with that provocation because I think it's meaningful place to do it. I think if we move away from that mentality of yes, somebody lost, somebody won. We know no winners in wars. I mean, there is no winners in wars. What the West lost in terms of destabilization by Soviet Union withdrawing from the power, it was tremendous, horrendous too. So there were some negative impacts on both sides. So the quicker we sort of move away from that point of view, somebody lost, somebody won, I'm the victim, I'm the winner, and so on, the better we are off. And I think what is waiting for us at the end of this inevitable conflict, as I perceive it, is a new arrangements, a new alliances, new relationships, maybe new world organization and renewal of international order, but in a different way. So that's basically all I wanted to add.
Yeah, thank you, Sergei. I mean, it was meant as a provocation, but it was a provocation based on something that I was thinking. It's like I'm thinking about the Brits, that the Brexit was like the final end of the British idea of being a world power, which has been like, it has been diminishing, let's say that. And I think in Russia, this hasn't happened. I think that's what I mean by lost the Cold War. Poland is not a part of the, post-Soviet, I don't want to call it empire, but interest thing. And none of the former Warsaw Pact states is still part of that. So I do understand that. It's like, it's like the buffer is gone, right? So just turning that around is, the buffer was really against us, so really, anyway, so there's one final thing I want to get in, because that was just a remark, is the Russia-China connection. We heard that Russia asked for help of China, I think economically, and that China said no. This is what we heard. Economically, Russia is 2% of the imports of China. So economically, there is really no reason for China to side with Russia at all. So it must be another one. And I think for its economic power, Russia has far too big a military, just as the US has. So, they tried to extend their empires. So, yeah, I don't think there will be an axis Russia-China. I don't think it's in China's long-term interest to support Russia, because Russia is really, if you look at the internal state and if you look at who's going to follow after Putin, I mean, Putin is not in an age where you don't have to ask those types of questions. And so the only thing Russia has is a huge military and oil and gas and stuff like that. So Chinese interest will lie within that. And as far as I know, but Sergei will know probably better, is that in the whole northeastern part of Russia, you hardly find any more Russians. Mostly it's Chinese who live there now and do business and stuff like that. But so the Russia-Chinese conversion is more China kind of taking parts of that empty part of Russia. So I don't think there will be a alliance of any kind. China is its own player and is not in need of any partner for anything at all. So they will side with Russia as long as it suits them, and then they will turn around when it suits them. So that's like a general situation that I see.
We also have a question from one of our participants in this call. Hurraira, if you could unmute your mic and ask the question, and if it is addressed to any gentleman, you can point out, please.
Yes, thank you, Xaryab bhai, for providing me the opportunity to ask a question. Basically, my question is about the Ukrainian conflict. We know there are two groups involved in this. One is the US, the West, currently known as the West, and then we have the Russians invading all the Ukrainian territory. So I wanted to ask about the possible outcomes or the possible result that we must expect in the future about this whole conflict. I mean, where is this leading us to? There are two sides. Are there going to be any win-win situation or any lose situation for any two sides among them? And if anybody amongst the panelists could address it, welcome from my side.
Sergei, I would say we start in the same manner. If you could answer, and then we could have quick answers from everybody, probably.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
I think taking into account objectives of the campaign, and they are demilitarization of Ukraine, denazification of Ukraine, and a neutral status, you can see the situation building up that Russia will not stop in Ukraine until it actually accomplishes those goals. And if it does stop because of some sort of agreement with a president that doesn't have real power, it would be to tremendous loss of face in Russia, both within Russia and outside. So Russia has to, because it has declared a clear goals of conflict, it has to achieve those goals. So how is it going to end up geographically? I mean, you can see the provinces, eastern provinces, and Malorussia, which is sort of central part of Ukraine, becoming a federal states and forming a different relationship as a federal entities of one country. Russia doesn't have intention, as far as I know, and that's talking to my sources in Russia, as well as observing the situation. Russia doesn't want Ukraine to become part of Russia. It will help financially, it will help under condition that the government of new country is actually neutral, genuinely neutral, and there are some options already with the leaders of new country. And so geographically, those Western republics, Western provinces of Ukraine with traditionally anti-Russian, they're going to be part of maybe Poland and Romania, perhaps, or remain as an ongoing conflict base in Ukraine. The rest of the Ukraine is going to be neutral, and it's going to be divided into federal states that will have close ties between each other and develop economic relationships with Russia. That's my view of how it will end up, because otherwise you will not be able to achieve the goal of denazification, changing the direction of neo-fascist nationalistic movement is a very difficult task now, because Ukrainians have created a generation of young people that actually think along those lines. And I'm very disturbed hearing some of the presenters taking Eichmann's strategy and saying that what we need to do, we need to kill children to destroy the nation. And so they are actually inviting to kill Russian children in order to change Russian nation, in order to make those detrimental impacts on Russian communities. And that is not going to sit well, I know that. And I know there are some sentiments that soldiers do not want to stop. They want to finish the job. That's from me.
Yeah,
Okay.
let me give my point of view. It really depends on how the war ends. There's different perspectives. And just in the last 2 days, when I was thinking about our conversation here, I have been looking into what military analysts all over the world practically say about the situation. And basically, they do agree on this one thing where they say, well, it seems that Russia thought it was going to do a blitz war, and it was going to be celebrated by the population who have been so sorely governed by neo-Nazis, apparently. And the population doesn't seem to do that. So the population seems to act as if the Ukraine were a democratic state. So it depends a lot on that end. I think what Putin has achieved, counter to what he may have wanted to achieve, is like a kind of a unification in Western countries in Europe that I didn't think were possible at all. Really, I didn't think we could give such a response in such a quick time, an economic response that cut into our own meat. That was amazing to me. So, and he may have kind of put the Ukrainian people together in kind of, even Russian Ukrainians and Ukrainians seem to be unified. At least this is what I hear from the Ukraine. But that's probably because my friends are more on the line with my way of thinking, and I wouldn't take that to be the truth at all. So the outcome will really depend on if Russia is capable to occupy Kiev, because they would need to do that to affect the regime change that they want. And if they are capable to do that, they're up against a all-German Ukrainian boxer, Klitschko, which is the mayor of Kiev. He used to be a boxer, famous boxer in Germany. Anyway, so yeah, it really depends. Can the Russians achieve that goal within a time frame of, say, the next couple of weeks? Can they achieve that? If they can achieve that, then they will dictate basically the outcome to the Ukraine. If they cannot, it will be much more complicated, because then Russia will have to lose face and hide that it does. So, if it cannot achieve its war goals, basically we have a horrible situation. So, in a very strange kind of way, I hope Russia achieves its war goals so we don't have it cornered and then become totally irrational by irrational in this case, I mean that they don't shift around their goals of what the war goals are. Is it denazification? Is it taking away these labs? Is it both? Is it something entirely different? So, yeah, so the end of the war, we don't know. That's what the war is about, is to create the kind of end that Russia wants or the kind of end that the Ukraine wants. So, or the West wants, if you want to say, if you really believe this is a proxy war, then what the West says. So, yeah, we don't know.
From my point of view, I think there's always winners and losers in any conflict, any war. Economically, already we're seeing huge demands for supply of goods and armaments and other services to Ukraine, and they're willing to pay, way over the odds for whatever is in demand. I've had various requests made for us from our point, and we're looking at certain things. So there's always gains to be made from that point of view. I've seen conflicts in the Gulf as well. So we did rather well out of those sorts of situations. So there is always winners and losers from that point. The Russians, Mr. Putin, took a calculated risk. I think he'll see it through. I don't see him backing out. He will cry and he will, he can't. He has to see it all the way through. How long that might take is anybody's guess. I think he thought it might be a little bit quicker than already expected, but that's not going to deter him. He will carry it through. So it's just a little bit of wait and see how things pan out over the next few weeks rather than days. Already we're starting to see certain dialogues taking part. I know Turkey has been in the middle of it, trying to appease and bring everybody around the negotiating table. So that will also, we will have to wait and see how that works out as well.
Well, firstly, thank you, Hurraira, for your question. And just like I said in the beginning of our program, that there are questions coming from our viewers and our Grey Lounge members, and also questions out in the public being discussed. And I also believe that I don't think Putin decided that in a rush. I don't think it was an impulsive decision. I think he has planned it, and he has planned it in the past years in a way that that it may not seem to be a typical war strategy that people can study and forecast. But I can see, I can sense that the body language of Putin itself from the past, from this term onwards when he joined was different. It was very, very clear, straight up front. He was not paying attention to anything other than his motives, his goals, his plans. He was noticing the moves being made by forces around Russia, and he knew which country to make friends with and which not to. So it is not something that just happened out of nothing. And I believe until he demilitarizes Ukraine or denazifies, as Sergei said, and not just that, I think after this, if any infiltration or any uh, anything coming from NATO, if takes place, and I would not say God forbid, because honestly speaking, I think now it's about time that things really come out of the bag and open up. So I really want things to finally open up, and if rockets are starting to fly in from Poland, or if NATO finally does decide to take this one step ahead, I think Putin's next threat would be putting its nuclear assets out in the open, and I think that is in the offing. I believe this
He
conflict.
already has.
Yeah, I believe this conflict should not be taken lightly by any neighboring country or people who are connected and affiliated with these countries, because this, when erupts, will not just stay localized. It will actually erupt in a multi-dimensional and multifold way. So I think this conflict is actually the defining moment of the next decades of who stays and who falls. So this is to be followed up very closely. I think so. I'm going to check if there's any other question, because there was a question being asked earlier by one of our Grey Lounge members, a lady, but I think she's not in the conversation anymore. But she was pointing out, just like when we were mentioning the biowarfare laboratories, she was mentioning something to do with we shouldn't forget Crimea, annexed in 2014, was for a reason too, and wondering if biofacilities were not a threat, then the vaccine victims are a hoax, and fourth, those Pfizer news is just entertainment. So yeah, people are really looking at the whole vaccine invasion now as a hoax because of because of this bio warfare laboratories, if considered as a hoax. So yeah, if there's any other point that needs to be made, otherwise I have a lot of questions and points to address that I had prepared also. But if you gentlemen agree, then we can continue with this now, and I can put forth those questions. Otherwise, we can always move to the next episode. However, all you gentlemen decide.
I'm just conscious of time. I know in Australia, once again, it's very late, and these gentlemen are very busy. Just a anecdotal point and bringing it to more the Pakistan perspective. This is a personal point. I was in the Ministry of Defense a few years ago, and on a personal visit to see the Minister of Defense, who was a personal friend of mine. And during our meeting, the Russian ambassador turned up, and totally unplanned, totally sort of expected. And he brought a message from Moscow to the minister. And just out of politeness and etiquette, I decided I opted to step out of the meeting so they could conduct their meeting. But the minister insisted that I stay and witness this. And so this is a personal, it's something that I was present, and it's not something that I've heard or read or whatever. This is sort of witnessed by myself. And I just found it fascinating because the ambassador brought a message from Moscow relating to the oil pipeline that was coming through Russia, through Iran, through Pakistan to India. And the offer was made of, and I won't go into figures, I don't want to mention names or whatever, because I don't think it would be appropriate, but the amounts that were offered were actually staggering amounts. And we're talking about years of advance payment to be made there and then to Pakistan for allowing this pipeline to cross over Pakistan. And I was actually flabbergasted by the numbers, sheer numbers that were being offered. So the point I'm making is that this is big politics, it's big economics for countries to be dealing with. I didn't think it would be appropriate for me to comment upon it at that particular time or to get involved or to follow up with it, but I just found it fascinating how politics work themselves out. And once again, this was just totally unexpected. It just came out of the blue, and I was witness to this. And this message was then relayed to the PM through the Minister of Defense. And then, however it was worked out, I'm not sure, but it was just strange how it all worked out on the day.
Yeah,
This
I
is
really
why
like.
interesting times. Yes, please, Mushin.
What I like about this story is that it kind of underlines my argument that wars are between oligarchs and never between people.
No.
People are being whipped up. What the fuck do we need propaganda for? Well, people need to be whipped up to support this or that oligarch, right? So it is not a war. So this is what I learned from this conversation, really, and talking with you
Absolutely.
guys. It's not a war of Russians against Ukrainians or the other way around. It is a war of Russian oligarchs on Ukrainian oligarchs. That's what it is. So, but other than that, it's a war with suffering. So I learned, this is what I learned, and the other thing I learned is it's really hard to listen to arguments where I fucking know they're not true, right? That's the feeling, right? So I hear about this and that. I'm not going to mention which they are, but I simply have done research. I used to be a journalist, so I used the journalistic tools to do research in some of these claims. So and how hard it is to listen, but also how good it is to understand that these arguments, whether or not they're true, play a major part in the way forward is possible. So that's what basically I learned. It's really hard. I learned it to a lesser degree in some conversations I had with Russians here in Berlin. it's really hard to listen to Russian state propaganda, basically. It's really hard. It's really, really difficult for me. It's less difficult, but just as nauseating to listen to our propaganda, what I recognize clearly to be propaganda. You know, it's not so hard to listen to that as it is to listen to. So it's not so hard to listen to our lies than it is to listen to their lies. So this is what I learned. So and 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 so for me, part of this war, which is the most dangerous war in my lifetime, that this war is kind of bringing that back and that understanding back, and that it doesn't really matter how your arguments make me feel. They are your arguments, and you have enough reason to make them. So I must deal with them. I must deal with them, and I cannot deal with them by just saying they're not true. Even if I would know that would be the case, it doesn't work, because that's how this war started. Russia said this, Ukraine said nah. So boom, right? So I mean, that's what. So I go back to Clausewitz. Clausewitz, the famous German military genie, and he said, "War is just politics with other means." So I learned where my weaknesses are in this conversation. So thank you very much. That was very helpful.
I think also that comes to mind is the statement from Joseph Goebbels, the Minister for Propaganda for Nazi Germany. You tell a lie enough times, people believe in it.
Yeah, and it must be big. It must be big. He also said it must be a big lie, and you must tell it all the time.
Yeah. Tell it enough times, people will believe in it.
Yeah,
especially if it's told by a president of the country.
Yeah.
Well,
any country.
That's
any country. except Pakistan, because really, I really believe Imran Khan is right on everything. I mean, you know, this is not irony.
No,
I really,
I was
I've been
referring to
following
Ukrainian president. Yeah.
that.
well, I really believe that that programs like these are essential. Why? Because these topics are basically the real topics, the game-changing issues, and which will affect not only countries and states, but also people living in these countries, and their businesses and their jobs and their projects and their concepts, because the effects of these wars and these shifts of power come down to the average Joe in every country. It's just a matter of perceiving it and understanding it and foreseeing the aftermath of such incidents taking place on the globe, and this is how we tend to at Grey Lounge we tend to bring these topics into discussion, and to get a broader perspective on issues so huge, and also issues which we are associated with one way or the other. And I thank you, all of you, for sparing time, and also actually speaking your heart out, as we noticed, about certain things which we stand for, certain values that have defined our characters as people, and as parents, as siblings, as citizens of our countries, and as businessmen, or as working people. And I think these I would, as I said, I had a lot of other questions to add, but I think we move it to the next episode, because this is, for me, it has been so good, informative, and also and it opened my perspective in another dimension altogether. Why? Because you know the way Raza Bhai and Mushin are naturally on falling on one side, and Sergei and I were falling on the other side. That I actually unscripted way turned the discussion into a more healthy conversation, because we got to have a different perspective. If we were aligned in everything that we were coming up with, things would have been probably a bit more dull and dry. I think this way we got to hear how how all four of us in a way think the same on certain things and very different in other things. Not just because we are sitting in, all four are sitting in different countries, but also because the effects of situations that we go through, the psychological effects that we face sitting in an environment, say in Britain or in Berlin or in Australia and in Pakistan, the effects would definitely change our way of thinking because of the environment that we are living in. And it's because of the daily lives that I am being used to. Although it's been only 30 years that Sergei is in Australia, he has a background of 30 generations probably from Russia. So the effects that is coming is so immaculate when you think about it, that it really needs to be addressed. It really needs to be talked about and point-wise addressed one by one. And maybe after this program of ours, it has also affected people, and it will affect people who listen to it and who see four different opinions out of a single thought, and sometimes four different thoughts converging into the same single opinion. So that is the whole point of these programs, and I'm very glad that we had our minds very prepared and open for all these conversations, where there were certain points, there were certain moments where we were, I wouldn't say we were opposing. I would say we were different. We had a difference of opinion and difference of thought and philosophy even, and that was the most beautiful part of it. That was the most enjoyable part of it. So I would, as we normally do in our Point to Ponder, I would want all of us, starting from the same sequence, to have one last word, starting from Sergei and then to Mushin, and Raza Bhai, you do the closing in the end.
Well, thank you. I also enjoyed our conversation and our differences, misalignments, which is diversity of opinions, and also the way we overcame those differences in conversation in a very very thorough professional way, I think. So what I would like to kind of look at piece of nature, I suppose, and give an example of a tree that we have growing here. It's called Antarctic beech, Nothofagus murray, and those trees are very ancient trees, and they used to grow in a colder climate, and in our area they now receded to the tops of the mountains if soil allows. One characteristic of those trees is they have huge underground part, and those trees estimated to live, well, now we have some samples here in Australia, 2,500–3,000 years old. And those trees, when you look at the trunks of the trees, when you say, oh, 3,000 old tree, it's huge, and no, they're not huge. The trunks are coming from the bulb of the tree as other trunks go. And these trunks appear to be different, but at the very foundation of it, they are exactly the same. They have the same leaves, they have the same bark, they have the same willingness to grow. And I think what we have as human being, and here I want to use Mushin's kind of wishful thinking, I hope that using that analogy, we can actually avoid the hot conflict that is now unfolding. And I think we have so much in common despite of our differences. And on that point, I'd like to hand over to Mushin.
Thank you, Sergei. Yeah. I very much agree. Especially about your wishful thinking. To return that, I think really, maybe in times of war, wishful thinking comes to the fore. That even rhymes. So wars are about reality. What is real? My point, your point. Ultimate conflict, because now we're going to send each other to death potentially over our differences. So, for me, other than the other wars where it was very clear to me, like the war in Vietnam, which was like the first major war that influenced my life and me personally, and then the revolutions in Nicaragua, and so on. So I'm 68 now, so I come from a time when things were pretty clear. And because they were pretty clear, I mean, where people were really different, because things were very clear, the limits and so on, that was very clear. And now we're in the times since around about 30 years now of not the new world order, but I would say the new world disorder, right? So we have a new form of disorder. It was never orderly, but we come from a time of some order to total disorder. And in this time, to experience conversation in which sides agree, at the very least, on hearing each other out and trying to understand what the other wants, and distinguishing that from the reasons, because reasons we will never agree on, but we may agree on a course towards the future. So this kind of gives me hope. I mean, our conversation gives me hope. So yeah, I'm happy if this could go on, because it's really diverse point of view. I learned that even though I lived in Asia for a long time, I'm extremely Eurocentric, and so I have a feel for the Europeans, but I don't have a feel for Pakistan, Indians, and so on, for those politics. I know how they're generated. I would call myself a Machiavellist, because I think Machiavelli was the first one who understood that politics is always fought by every mean imaginable, and it's never about right and wrong. And so I'm being humanly a humanist that says, like Raza said, we're all the same blood, we're all the same stuff, we're all the same, we're made 99.9999%, we're all the same, and we fight about difference. So it's interesting. Yeah, I like that I would like that we go on and find out more about, how to, what is seen and how these differences are, and use this kind of conversation to go on. Because if we're laughing while we are having very diverse opinions, I think we're still on the good side. So maybe the Russians and the Ukrainians should have a huge laughing session and then sit down and do business. Yeah.
Thank you. From my point, certainly hope, which we've all echoed. I would add prayer as well. I think we all need to, at some point, open our hearts and make the prayer as well that things are sorted out. I think before Xubi triggers off the next world war, I must get my last game of golf in. So this, while the weather's good, I'm going to play my final game of golf before the world war breaks out. Conflicts like this, maybe get the presidents together in a boxing ring and let them fight it out between themselves. You know, why should the world, why should the rest of the public suffer? Let them fight it out, and let's see who is the fittest, who is the strongest out of them. I can imagine Putin knocking Biden out, you know, probably in the first round. But it's good that we can not trivialize, but certainly have a lighter viewpoint and be able to talk with one another. And everything comes from dialogue. And, you know, we need to maintain the dialogue, and everybody needs to maintain the dialogue and find resolution rather than conflict.
Yeah, and about me triggering the World War Z, I'm just gonna try to make it brief so that we've talked a lot, and I'm glad we did. See, I was raised as a chess player. My father taught me chess when I was 8 or 9, and then I played chess, and I happened to win tournaments in the United States on state level. So I became very good at chess. And then as I was growing older, my father taught me how to play poker. And we used to play poker at home with play money, and we used to play it very seriously. It was a game, but it was never played like a game. My father has taught me to play chess and poker not like a game, but more of a learning thing. That do not take it easy. Do not take poker for granted. Do not take chess for granted. And I'm glad I didn't. And now when I look at things, I honestly look at things, look at the world like a chessboard, but only this time with certain cards in hand as well. That because I believe these games, these board games are not played on the board, they're played here. Likewise with poker. These two games, I actually say to all my friends that you should teach your children chess and poker if you're supposed to, if you want them to live a strategic life, something that they plan, something that is not spontaneous or unplanned. So when I look at the whole world and these sort of conflicts and these sort of issues, I can see it differently. I can see that it's a game of chess being played, and there's a hint of poker to it because you've got certain stakes and certain cards in hand. So you cannot undermine the war aspect of it, the fighting aspect of it, and the outcome of a fighting of it. So it's going to happen. It's inevitable that men are going to fight. They are going to either fight in the ring, just like Raza is saying, that Putin is going to knock plenty of presidents out in the first round, not just the poor Biden. It can knock plenty of people out by the looks of it. But I think it's here. It's a matter of nerves now. I believe now is the time when the nerves are tested to the utmost. It is high time when the board has, the chessboard has now somewhere very strong pieces on either end. It's not just one-sided, one queen, two rooks, and two bishops on one side, and probably just a few pawns on the other. Not anymore. I believe now now things are changed. Things have changed economically and strategically, and as Sergei said, the alliances. I think now mankind collectively on its way to the end of times, it has learned that we are supposed to have a system in place on the planet, and we have to have a certain amount of ruling in that. So those who can and those who can afford to will always battle for power, will always battle for supremacy, and we cannot just wishfully ask for peace. I think what we could ask for when we want peace is that we come on the sides, we grow as a nation on the side which has the power game, which is part of the board game of chess, and then design, engineer a peaceful environment. If we are sitting in a powerful state like Germany and not becoming a player on the board, or if we are sitting in China or in Russia or the US and not playing on the board, then it is unnatural of that human being or that mankind's evolution that it would not take charge. Okay, Uganda would not, South Africa may not want to play, Nepal would not want to play a role in that, but Pakistan will. Pakistan does see itself as one of those who are building a board of their own, or are strategically located at a place where they have a tiny little board which does make a difference in the greater picture. So we have to see which way the chess moves are being planned. I mean, Sergei, I'm sure, being Russian, has to be very good at chess, because Russians always produce the best chess players in the world. So you have to think 50 moves ahead, or probably 100 moves ahead, and not count the blunders. Because when we count the best moves, we are always countered by certain blunders which are not in our planning, and then we're shocked that what this blunder was not even expected in my counting. So we have to pick up the best moves. Not, I mean, no offense to anybody, but wishful moves are more of blunders coming from the other side in the game of chess. I would say the best move could sometimes be a peaceful resolution. The best move could sometimes be a diplomatic answer to a war, or negotiations on table. On just like Pakistan, Afghanistan situation, or Afghanistan and NATO situation, it actually, and at the end of the day, it had to come down on a dialogue. But that is also the best move of that particular time. Not earlier. 10 years ago, it was war. That was the best move that they could have thought of. So it's how to predict those moves as a chess player. And I see the next moves to be not very peaceful, to be honest. The next moves that mankind has on the board are going to be certain sacrifices of a bishop or a rook or a knight or even a pawn. And these sacrifices on the board of chess are good moves, are probably at times best moves when you sacrifice a bishop and win the game. It may seem like we're sacrificing people or loss of life or war, but on the board, it's the best move that man can think of. So that's how I see it, and so I see World War III in the offing.
Xubi, as much as you are a chess player and a poker player, you're also a musician. And that musician side of it needs to balance things out.
I'm a poet, I'm a writer.
Exactly. So
there's a soft side of mine, but the chess player has to, strategically plan for the worst and the best possible move from the opponent. Yeah, so I'm more of hopeful that things actually turn out to be rather peaceful, particularly for people who are suffering. The soldiers who are fighting on both sides, they have families, they have children, they had a life before that day when the first decision was made, and now all they have is death in their plate. it could be a death from a bullet, or death could or bomb blast. That is not something anybody would want to wish for in any case. But on the same side, I would say if there's wrong being done, and wrong is not, I mean, it's a relative statement. My wrong could be your right, and your wrong could be mine. As they say, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. So again, I think some sanity should prevail, even if it has to come at the cost of a few lives. That's what I want to say.
Let's leave it at that.
So you expect sanity in politics? I think that's wishful thinking. There is no sanity in politics. So yeah. I think the real thing is towards the end of the Cold War, there was something called realpolitik, which basically meant,
Yes.
say goodbye to all these arguments about the West was always about we bring you democracy and stuff like that, right? So do away with all of that. Yeah. So I don't expect sanity from politicians at all. They have, which is why I'm so amazed about what is happening now. It seems like when I hear the people in Brussels, in Europe's capital, talking, or I'm amazed how sane all of a sudden some people are. So, but anyway, I don't expect sanity from them. I expect them. I think if you're in chess, you try to force your opponent into a particular configuration. And I I think that may be what we are experiencing, uh, because of the several weaknesses and strengths. So yeah, I can understand the sentiment of kind of say, let's blow it up and then everything will clear up, basically, but it never does. You know, after Germany lost the war and everything was destroyed, who do you think took over? Was it the mafia or was it the American military police or the Russian military police? No, it was the mafia, right? So they took over. Black market takes over. That's what governs in and after wars. You have black economies. So so the fallout of however large the conflict is going to be for oligarchs and for the mafia. And for everybody else, it's going to be, oh my God.
Oh my God. I love the way you put it. And I think Sergei wants to add something to that.
I wanted to add just a neutral point. My father also taught me to play chess. So we are very similar. I'm not. It's not a coincidence. I think that we have similar standpoints. We have few things in common. You happen to be, you are a musician. I make musical instruments. Yeah. You write some poetry. I also write poetry just for myself and just. So it's interesting.
You have the same hairstyle as well.
Sorry?
Yes.
But I wanted to take your analogy with the chess game. I'm not, I cannot proclaim myself as a good chess player, but I like chess. In fact, I wanted to offer a Mushin a game of chess when we had our disagreements. But
I'm not very good.
It was a sinister thought because I experienced playing with some of the very strong players, very strong chess players, that I could win a chess game with a very strong player only once. if I play chess as if I'm playing ice hockey. Because often a chess player on the other side of the desk is not prepared for an internal aggression against an individual. And usually people on that shorter distance, and because I used to play ice hockey too, you know, people usually react to that, but you can win only one game because they quickly learn that it's very easy to deal with that because you're playing chess after all. It's not an ice hockey game. But there is a kind of a lesson from that. And I hope the chess game that we have on board is not played by people who used to play ice hockey. And they remember that this is, after all, a chessboard. So yeah, that's.
It would be interesting to play chess with both you gentlemen, and we will, and we will discuss.
May I just add this one little thing? Other than chess, Putin has reinvented war. We used to have this idea of there's war, then there's and then there's peace, and in between those are treaties and diplomatic. And Putin has changed the game of war utterly. He just refuses to call it war, and then it's in a kind of a
Maybe he's taking advices from Gary Kasparov.
Yeah, he may be. I mean, so he's really expanding. So so if we take chess, like he's also saying, well, the chess board is actually a player, and then the air above the board is actually a player, and so on and so on. So he kind of expands it, and thereby expands hugely his arsenal of tools that he can use in a war. I mean, other than he's always saying the West is sorely restricted through democracy in what it can do, and he's not that much restricted by his system in what he can do. And so he is doing incredible things. I mean, as a person that studies strategy and tactics for quite a while now. I have this huge book by a couple of American militaries to understand their tactics, and then some Iranians. So, he's doing what. So let's say he's just inventing so you have rooks, and then he's inventing the little green man, and then he's inventing some other players into this game. So. Other than, I mean, he is being treated as a madman in the West now. I think he's incredibly intelligent and expanding our understanding of what war is and how you fight them. So
I thought it was a Hitler who changed the war game altogether, engulfing the whole Europe. I'm sorry, I just couldn't pass that. No, it's not going to.
Hitler just used Clausewitz. He lost like Napoleon did in Russia. So
that's another point I wanted. That's another point I wanted to make. From this kind of, from your standing, from your perspective, I can't help but think that Europe must have forgotten how Russians marched the streets of cities in Europe, and why they did that. And I think this game of United States of pushing Europe against Russia, and Europe is not seeing that kind of chess game is not to me.
You see,
I can't
don't know, but
it.
we did. My whole generation was politically identified by anti-Americanism, basically. So, but then always here in the West, they said, well, go over there, right? Go to East Berlin or Russia, right? This is what, I mean, for 20 years, I've been at the receiving end of those kinds of remarks. So it's not like, you're not talking with an anti-Russian at all, at all. Actually, the the Russians played a major role in liberating Berlin. So, and and then
Currently Ukraine is playing that card with Israel, as I said earlier. The Ukrainian ambassador in Israel is playing that card, that we played a vital role in helping the Jews, and hence now it's time to reciprocate. And I think this is how they're bringing people, recruiting rather people from Israel to say that, okay, we helped you. It's time for you to help us.
well, you may not know this, but there's a huge movement in Germany against occupation of Palestine lands. I mean, to just reduce Germany to a government policy
About
that they
time.
inherited after we have to pay Israel. It's like a part of the treaty. When we lost the war,
Yeah.
you get dictated the conditions. So
That's
part
another.
of the conditions, so this was for Germany to finance Israel. But it's also hugely financing the Palestinians. I mean, how much the European Union pays to the Palestinian governments per year?
To stay
It's
quiet.
round about 200 million. Round about 200 million from the European Union go to Palestinian authorities every year. I don't know how much of that money lands with the people, with the Palestinian people. I doubt, if any, but this is what Germany is also doing. So to reduce Germany to those simple pictures doesn't work when I'm around. You wouldn't work like that.
No. What I'm saying
No,
is,
no, no.
yeah, you got me wrong. What I'm saying is that Ukraine is currently playing this card with Israel. The ambassador of Ukraine is actually bringing in people from Israel, recruiting people that we helped you when Germany was invading, or when the Jews were being butchered. So now it's time that you help the Russians. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah, sure.
And the other point I made was that that still, for some reason, the German state feels and has an apologetic stance with Israel, as if they are still sorry, and they still apologize for what had happened during the time of Hitler.
You don't just kill 7 million people,
Yeah, see,
of a particular religion and then get away with it
that's
if
what I
the
was.
other side wins. I mean, if
I'm
we
not
would have
saying
won,
that.
it would have been no
I'm not
problem.
saying.
But,
And, and the other point you made, I know that globally, it's the people's opinion goes in favor of Palestinians when there's Israel, when Israel has an offense and has an in any shape. So that's another topic, another point that we will have. But there was a set of questions that I did not put during this episode, addressed particularly to you for the German stance in various aspects that we will have, because it is arising from this conflict also. There are certain things that will arise, and certain things have already shown up. That why is the German stance in favor of Ukraine and not Russia? But how does Germany differentiate between the support that it had when Russia actually supported Germany?
there was a Cold War in between.
Yeah,
That's what I would say.
and then post 1989, was it when the wall came down? What is how does Germany see Russia as? These are second episode questions that we will have, and I totally understand when you say that EU supports Palestine as much as they possibly can, despite the evident favor that they have to have for Israel. That is quite understandable.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing. I mean, so I have a tendency to now go all over the place. I mean, one of the things that I always notice is that the last time the Palestinian voted about the government they want to have is something like 15 or 20 years ago, or 10 at the very least. So, the European Union supporting a non-voted for government in such an amount, I always thought, well, that's kind of interesting. So anyway, there must be a lot of guilt somewhere hidden in those areas. So yeah, as there is in Germany and so on. This is what German right-wingers and Nazis are telling us is forget all about the past, forget about our war guilt, blah blah, forget all about that. And then other people say, well, you can't avoid the consequences of a war, even if you didn't start it yourself, if it was started by your oligarchs or your industrial military complex or whatever, So, yeah.
Gentlemen, I have to go. Unfortunately, I'd love to participate in the next episode, and I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I'd like to say thank you. Thank you for
very
inviting
much, everyone. And in the next episodes, we will have certain questions, and because by next Sunday, there will definitely be certain updates for most probably rockets flying in and out of Poland and everywhere. So we will have a lot of other things to add, and there were certain questions that I will also add in the next episode. I thank all of you dearly for taking time out and discussing this very important topic and enlightening our viewers with certain facts and figures and situational aspects that we were and our viewers were not aware of. And this is the whole sole purpose of these programs that we have. I thank you very much, Raza bhai. Thank you very much, Sergei and Mushin, for even also particularly for the patience that everybody has shown despite certain aspects which do not really fancy our philosophies that we are living with. So I thank you all, and Raza bhai, as always, a closing statement from you, and then we will.
No, thank you very much. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. It's always good to have difference of opinions as well, and being able to listen to difference of opinions is the key to it. But thank you very much, guys. Sergei, Mushin, for your time once again. And Xubi, thank you, as always, for hosting it. And look forward to next time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Have a nice,
Thank you.
have a nice weekend, all of.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.